So, my name is Rebecca Dawson. I am a speaker, an author, and a channeler from Australia originally. And my principal focus is the evolution of human consciousness and the ignition of human potential and new human capacities.
What is your take on spirituality? What does it mean?
Well, it's interesting because I was raised as a Catholic in my childhood, but I've investigated and explored in many different what you would call religions, I would call belief systems, um, from Buddhism to Taoism to Hinduism to Islam, because my great desire since I was a young child was to really know, I guess the term we use is God, to know God. But for me, it was really always an essence of mystery in it. So it became for me a quest to learn more about the mystery of life, the mystery of consciousness. And through exploring many different philosophies and many different belief systems, the threads always brought me back to unity consciousness. So, unity consciousness is where I land, it's where I begin from. And from there, it enables me to explore many different directions and many different things.
Was there maybe like a special moment that you can remember where you started to being interested in this question? What are we doing here? Who am I?
Well, really, it's always been there for me because when I was very young, you never really lose that sense of consciousness, or don't really lose that sense of essence of self when you're a young child. But as you grow more and you get introduced to the education system and the society's rules and structures and conventions, it pulls us further away from that knowing. So, as a young child, I was very interested in the paranormal and the mysteries of life because the structures and the rules and the goals that most humans had, or that I was introduced to as a child, didn't seem to make a lot of sense. It didn't seem to be enough. And I wasn't really interested in what was on offer. I was interested in what was behind everything. So really, I wanted to know, what is this? What is this life? Because I wasn't convinced that what I was being presented with was all that there was. I wanted to understand what the nature of everything was. And it was interesting because I was very interested in science when I was much younger. And when I was in the elementary school, I used to go to the high school to do my science classes because I was very interested in science. And I thought that that would enable me to understand the nature of life. But what I discovered was that it was not moving fast enough for my inquiry or my point of interest. So I really started to move more into metaphysics at that point and different philosophies, and more interestingly, into mysticism, because I discovered that mysticism encouraged me to ask more questions rather than to find the answers. And of course, I realized then that the power is in the question, not the answer. I think from a very young age, I still had awareness of other lives and other experiences that I had. I never really forgot them. The great challenge was trying to understand how the life I found myself in now, even as a female in this experience of life, how does this make any sense? How did I go from that to this? And why? And what's it all for? And how does this really work? Because it was really like waking up into a life that was not very familiar. There were some familiar aspects of it, for example, nature and trees, and the natural environment was familiar. My mother's energy was very familiar, but other things were not very familiar at all. So it was almost like waking up in a dream that didn't really make a lot of sense. So I wanted to understand it.
If I don't get to enlightenment, what is it worth for? Then I'll be born again and I'll forget everything and then I start over.
Well, it's interesting because I was very, very focused upon having an experience of illumination or enlightenment. Not because I felt like I wanted to arrive somewhere where I wasn't already, but because I really wanted to understand, what is this God? And I knew that it was in everything. And I knew that it was everything. And I could have a concept of it and understand it here. But I wanted to know it. It wasn't enough for me to understand it, but I wanted to experience it. So I spent many, many hours and many days and many weeks in meditation. I took some time when I was around, I think I was around 22 or 23 years old. And I went to Bali and I just sat there and meditated. And this was at a time before, it was a little bit crazy there and everybody was there. It was very quiet. It was quite a long time ago now. And I sat every day and I would go into meditation because I had read enough and understood enough at that time that nobody could give it to me. And I couldn't learn my way to it. I had to find it inside. So I would sit in meditation and I would feel myself really expanding. And I would be so devoted and I would be saying, I just want to know what this is. I want to experience it. And I would get so close where I'd feel myself really expanded. I'm just about to drop into something. I can feel it. I'm right on the edge. And then I would move back away from the edge again, and my mind would distract me or something would happen. And I remember doing this for weeks. And then suddenly it was very hot. I was in the sun. It was in the afternoon. And I thought, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? This is just such a waste of time. I should be out with other people my age, doing things that other 23-year-olds are doing. And then suddenly I said, I give up. I don't care. I give up. And Hans, in that moment, it happened. And what it was that it was a relaxing into illumination. So before I was trying to reach for it, I wanted it so badly. And when I just stopped and relaxed, it happened. And I had an experience that lasted 4 days that was a complete expansion of consciousness where I was everything and everything was me. And in that moment, my identity as an individual person, a Rebecca, just melted. And it was extraordinary. Everything was in perfect harmony. Everything was wonder. Everything was a wonder. Amazing. An insect would come past. The breeze would blow. And everything was perfect harmony. And I really experienced, it's difficult to put into words, but I was looking over a lagoon and there were coconut palms, and this is where I was living at the time, water, and there were some islands and people going past on the road. And everything was one living being. And every aspect of life that we could separate out, a tree, a person, a cow, they were all like tentacles on a giant octopus. It was one organism displaying itself in this view. And I was also a part of that. And it was the most extraordinary experience that really shifted everything for me, because after that, and it lasted 4 days, and I've had some experiences of this since. But after that time, I wasn't really interested in pursuing metaphysics anymore, because I wasn't really interested so much in black and white, the duality, karma. I was really interested, very interested in other people knowing about this.
You got your mission.
It was definitely an experience of that. But what I learned about it is that it's not a sustainable state for a human. And so we should take the pressure off ourselves with this idea or fantasy that you can stay in that all the time, because we are in a human experience in a reality that's based on duality. And so the duality in this reality is a function that keeps bringing us back to the unity awareness. So we pulse in and out. And since I've discovered that for myself, I'm very much relaxed about that. So there's no, I'm so terrible, I'm not in that unified state right now. We we pulse in and out. And then if you realize that, it's very easy and relaxed to go back in. So if we look at the nature of the cosmos, it actually is a pulsation. We pulse in and out of this reality. I think physicists are discovering this now as well. This illumination experience in my youth, I was still quite young. I really wanted everybody to know about this, but because I was so excited and it was so wonderful. Why doesn't everybody know this? It's the most wonderful thing. And of course, what I realized after some time is it's nothing you can't give it to people, and you can't even lead people to it.
But you are trying.
No, no, really, I just do what I do, and I talk about things that I'm interested in, and people ask me questions, and I answer them, and I share things that I'm interested in currently, but I can't give it to anyone, and I can't really lead them to it. I can point them in the right direction, but it's such a personal experience. And for sure, there's been many people that I've come into contact with that have had these experiences since conversations or um, sharing some of these views. But I would never put myself in a position where I would say, I can get you there. Because no one could get me there. It was something deeply personal that had to happen for myself.
You can ask for it and just wait for it to happen. It's not something to push for.
Right. I mean, you can make yourself available for it, but ultimately you have to relax into it. And that's what we talk about quite often actually with channeling, because I'm known in the world as a channeler. And channeling for people means a lot of different things. And for people, certainly, and most commonly, a channeler is someone that brings something outside of yourself in. Whereas my experience of channeling is bringing something inside out, because we're all connected to the one. So there are different streams of consciousness that can come out if you're not attached to your personality. So for me, even with the channeling and coming out, we very much like to talk about how there's not much distinction between humans, and we're all part of the one. And so channeling is the modality through which we express some of this wisdom, but it's deeply rooted in unity consciousness.
Is it necessary to sit down and meditate? I sit down, I meditate for 20 seconds, and I already have a very good idea what to do next.
No, I don't think it's necessary to meditate. And I think a lot of people would probably not agree with that. I certainly began with meditation, but in essence, it was when I gave up that the illumination happened for me. I think meditation can be wonderful to bring you into a present moment experience, because when we're in the now moment or the present moment, it opens up so much more consciousness that's available to us. If we look at time as a linear construct and we have an x-axis, when we move into the now moment, we're on the y-axis. We intersect time. And when that happens, we get to access so much more of consciousness. So meditation is wonderful for that. But when you are living moment to moment and you are deeply present in your day and you're paying attention and you're sensing things and you're really there with life, then your life is a meditation. So meditation, for me at least, is just being fully present. So like you, I haven't really enjoyed sitting down and doing formal meditation for many, many years. I haven't done that. And it used to shock people. They'd say, well, don't you meditate every day? Not really. I mean, I do now enjoy, taking 20 minutes and just being, because life can be quite busy. But I certainly have not found it to be a requirement for illumination.
I understand, like, actually, if we look at it at the very basic, or we look behind the curtain, we're not doing anything. Everything is channeled, like all the energy. I mean, my whole being. I'm here because of divine grace. I am existing, and that's the starting point of it. But I didn't do that. I mean, I'm not the doer. Everything that is happening is doing through me. I mean, I'm doing this video stuff and I'm writing essays, but actually, I didn't prepare for that. I don't know what I'm doing.
I love that. I love that. And I often say that is that I don't really know what I'm doing. I just show up and something happens. So all of the workshops and seminars and courses and everything that we do, I say we because we are a collective consciousness. Everything that we do is completely spontaneous. So and sometimes that's difficult for people to really understand or believe that we can go and, do a 6 hour seminar without any planning and not know what's going to happen. But when you are in the present moment, in the now moment, you have access to so much. It's quite incredible. It's like just turning a key in a lock and suddenly there's all this. And it's difficult to see that or access that if you're planning or being strategic, or these are the goals, this is what we want to achieve at the end of this, or this is what we're planning, this is what you're going to get if you come and engage with this. So we never know, because everything is a creation in present moment, and that is the nature of consciousness. So we never deliver a teaching, and we never give content. We create wisdom in the present moment that it is expressed. I think one of the most important things for people to realize, if they're interested in consciousness and becoming more conscious, is that they, in essence, as you so beautifully described, are all source consciousness expressing through them as them. And if you realize that, you stop disbelieving yourself. So you can actually start to believe yourself. You can start to believe what you think. You can start to believe what you're feeling. You can start to believe what you're sensing. You start to believe your own ideas, because you realize that what's coming from you is consciousness. And it's easy for people to get confused with that, because people often say, well, is it my ego? Is it my mind? What is it? It's all consciousness. And the great position that we have as assumed individual humans is we have this perspective, we have a point of view. And our point of view is such a gift, because our point of view and our opinions and perspectives, when they come together, they create and shape reality. So, for example, if you have, say, a sculpture or an object sitting on a table, and you have 6 people around, they're all going to see this completely differently. But if they don't believe their own perspective, then those perspectives can't come together as the eyes of God or the eyes of one consciousness and create the fullness of this form. It only exists because of multiple perspectives. So it's incredibly important that people realize that they are gifted with the authority of their own perspective. You are an expert in your own point of view. And you are an expert in what's important to you. And you are an expert in your perspective. And that's so important because when you realize that, you start to move into agreement with the consciousness that you are. And when you start to believe yourself and you're now the authority on your perspective, not in a way that's arrogant or controlling, but in a way where, yeah, this is how I see it. Therefore, this is the perspective. Something happens there because you start to really become a partner with consciousness. You start to really trust what it is you're feeling, what it is that you're thinking. And when you start to do that, the flow of wisdom and the vibration with which you speak completely changes. And
Yeah.
that's when we begin to shape reality. That's when what we say generates reality. You have to agree with it. I actually have a musical background. I went to a special music school actually when I was a child. I don't share that very often, but I always thought I was going to be a professional musician um, before I moved into this kind of exploration more seriously. But I love music because, and I love symphonies in particular, because if we see ourselves as multidimensional, multifaceted beings, we begin to see that our constitution is very much like a symphony. We have so many different notes, we have so many different instruments. And if we embrace that, we can stop identifying as one particular instrument. And we can now be focused on tuning the entire orchestra of ourselves so that all of the aspects of ourselves start to play in harmony. And that's very important because humans will often say, well, if I become more illuminated or I become more enlightened, I will no longer have this part of me that I don't like. I will no longer have anger. I will no longer have fear. I will no longer have all of these things. But they're all different instruments in the orchestra. The challenge is to have them play their part in a harmonious way. So we don't want to get rid of anything. We want to balance everything. There's a great awareness in many people that to become more conscious, I have to get rid of things. I have to release certain things. I have to let go of this to become this. And we often speak about how illumination is actually the opposite of that. So instead of trying to get rid of something, which is separation, right? We separate that out. We actually want to bring it even closer to us because you want to unify it into the source consciousness within. You want to return it home to the one. So we'll often say if there's a part of you that you don't like the anger or a memory or some part of your life, it's not that you need to keep it around you if it's not a good circumstance, but the idea about it and how you feel about it to actually bring it closer back to the one and return it back to source is actually incredibly illuminating because what you're doing is you're forgiving it, you're not having a judgment for it, you're uniting it back into the source that it came from, and from there illumination begins. So we always speak about inviting something back into the lap of the mother, or inviting it back into the source consciousness or the great central sun so that new life can begin. But it's counterintuitive for humanity that has been conditioned to believe that in order to grow, we have to cut things away. Sometimes, if you're cutting things and it's going back into the earth and then it's regenerating those plants, that's inviting it back into the one, right?
Yes. What happens when we die?
When we think about reincarnation, we think about it as a circle, and around we go. And that's partly partly true. But again, it's all about perspective, right? So for many people where that's their perspective, then it's absolutely true. You have to believe yourself. But if we look at everything occurring simultaneously in one moment, which we now know is at least evidential in science, we know that all of our lives are being experienced in the one moment. They are concurrent, simultaneous lives. So when we begin to embrace that truth, we begin to appreciate the magnitude of our consciousness that we can experience multiple lives simultaneously. As we become more conscious, humans are becoming more and more aware of this. So they're becoming more aware that they are multidimensional, and perhaps this is not the only expression of life that we are currently experiencing. There could be another one over here. There could be another one in a different experience of time, or a different location, or a different planet, or a different dimension. But they all occur simultaneously. So once we start to realize that, we start to see the patterns between them, the synchronicities between them, some similar elements between those lives. And we no longer focus on trying to correct history. We no longer focus on trying to repair certain things. And we no longer look at life, and this is somewhat challenging for people, we no longer look at life as a problem to be solved or a lesson to be learned. We now look at the wonder of, isn't it incredible how much life experiences itself in this way? And we're no longer trying to get it right. And we can now just say, let's experience as much as we possibly can, because that's evolution of consciousness as we experience it as humans. In our human experience, we're here to experience consciousness experiencing, evolving itself. A human cannot evolve God source consciousness. But God source consciousness can experience an evolution of itself through humanity. So just relax, because you can't do it anyway. I think that because we are currently viewing ourselves in a largely dualistic form of reality, if we realize that we are multifaceted and multidimensional, and we're going to experience all of those things, we no longer start to solve the problem of suffering existing. We just realize it's another facet of source consciousness expressing itself and experiencing an evolution of itself through that expression. I do feel, and we are aware that humanity is moving into a new era of consciousness now, where suffering, the way that we have experienced it, is not going to be as necessary to come to a point of illumination, especially when it comes to compassion, because humans have always learned that suffering is the doorway to compassion. We go through suffering or experience suffering with others to find compassion. Are we evolving beyond that requirement? And we believe that we are, where we can be compassionate without requiring suffering to be compassionate. And if we look at the word compassion, at least the etymology of it, originally it was with passion, compassione. We can be, it's life, affirming life. It's vigor, it's enthusiasm. And at some time, I think it was around the Roman period, the word became suffering. So compassion became to suffer with. You know, we had the compassion of the Christ, suffering of Christ. And one of the messages that came through quite recently in one of our seminars is that humanity is evolving into a consciousness again where compassion will be having passion for life and having passion for the experience, regardless of what the experience is.
How should we treat people those are actually really suffering?
To be a gift of presence is how we would answer that. Because if you're sitting alongside somebody who's experiencing great suffering, your gift to them, we could say it's compassion, it's to suffer with them. But what we would say is that you are deeply present with them in their suffering. And if you are deeply present, you're bringing that source consciousness into that space. And if you're deeply present, you're also aware that every experience that a human has is divine. Every experience is of the one source consciousness. That's unity consciousness. And so, therefore, you have a great passion for life as it is unfolding in this moment, even if it is this appearance of this person suffering next to you. You're still in great reverence, great awareness of that expression of source consciousness. To give you a practical example, when I had one of my early illumination experiences and I was in that state of complete oneness, I was walking down the street and I sat at a little table right on the side of the road to have a drink. And a motorcycle came along and crashed right next to me on the road. And the man was terribly injured. And it was literally maybe 1 meter away from where I was sitting. Crash. And in that moment, because I was already deep in that presence, it was just the most perfect, harmonious, incredible unfolding of life. And so, in that state of presence, I was able to be there and have such great love for the man that fell off the motorbike and what was happening, but I wasn't suffering with him. Because if we can't change it for you, we're going to be in it with you. But what does it mean to be in it with you? You can bring your presence and your great love of life to it. And that's so healing in itself, really.
But mainly, you talk about we, so you kind of gave up this idea that you are a person with a story and with this and the other. You take yourself out of the picture, and that's the way that it can happen. Maybe you want to say something.
Yes, although we don't really want to remove anything, it's more that we merge with it. So when I first started channeling many years ago, I was, 18, and my understanding more was metaphysics than, that there's some other consciousness that speaks through you. And so I experienced it as that. And it was quite a strong difference between me speaking and, the masters, I call them, coming through and speaking. And now it's just such a merging of consciousness. Whereas I see we are all branches of the same tree. So we just now present as the tree. It's much easier for a start. But it's also much more relaxing, and I just lean back and move into the embrace of it. And so I melt into it instead of trying to remove myself from it, because I'm sure anybody that's tried to be in meditation and remove the mind, it's very, very difficult. But if we can just relax the mind into it, it's much, much easier. And again, that brings us back to, instead of trying to remove things, just merge everything together, bring it into one place. My principal instrument was the piano, but I also played the flute and the clarinet, and I was actually on a scholarship for singing. Sound precedes light. So sound then generates light into the appearance of form. So your voice and the vibration of your voice will change as your consciousness shifts, because your capacity to create reality also expands. So the vibration of your voice is so important, because when we sound into this reality, light and form begins to reshape itself. So it makes perfect sense to me that your voice is changing, mine is also changing. So what's very important, particularly for the group of people that will be listening to this video, is that so much of our world encourages us to find the answers for things. And we even move into quests for illumination or enlightenment to find the answer. But it's actually the curiosity for the mystery that is the nature of source consciousness life itself. So when we arrive at an answer, it just moves us into another quest for another answer. So when we begin to realize that the answers are not the source of life vitality, but the curiosity for the mystery is life force and life essence, we begin to give ourselves permission to really enjoy being in the mystery. It no longer becomes a problem if we don't have the answer. It now becomes the energy with which we live our lives. We're always interested in asking new questions. We're interested in, I wonder what will happen here, or what is this possibility here? And in a society where all the value is placed upon the answers, we have an opportunity now to place the value on being in the mystery and having the curiosity to explore more, because that's the life essence that expands our consciousness. So I would just invite people to take the pressure off trying to arrive at an answer and focus more on what it feels like to be in the adventure of discovery. In certain religious constructs, there is an understanding that, God has the answers. But really, the nature of source consciousness is, what are the possibilities here? I mean, that's the fractalization of consciousness. It's the myriad of possibilities. How could this unfold in so many ways? And so that's the nature of God, if you want to use that word. It's not in the answer.
How can people connect with you?
So it's very easy. My name, RebeccaDawson.com. And I have a YouTube channel as well, a Rebecca Dawson channeler. And I have lots of interesting things you can listen to on my website and on YouTube also.
Thank you so much for your precious time. I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you too.
It's a field I'm not normally not touching because maybe it scares people, to talk about channeling but in the end it leads all to the same place, So it was
It
really
does.
beautiful.